Hi, welcome back to Odd Erica's. Today we're going to talk about finishing the quilt. And using the quilt that we just did the crosshatch quilting pattern on recently, we are going to cut this quilt, square it up, and get it ready to put binding on. Now there are two ways you can put binding on. You can do the way that we're going to do today, which is cutting off the batting and the backing right at the edge of the quilt, squaring it off, and then using I use 2.5 inch wide binding that I sew together. I'll show you how to do that later. However, I use 2.5 inch binding, and we will bind this quilt traditionally in that way. The way that you get this set up, you need a few things. Obviously, I'm back at my handy dandy fold out table here. I have two Fiskars mats that are 24 by 36 inches, and I have them lined up against each other here on my table. I also have my Olfa 60mm rotary cutter, my handy dandy Omni Edge. This is my 36 incher. This is a Fiskars 24.5 by 5.5 ruler. So I'm going to line these up end to end. And this is what we're going to use to square it with. This is an Omni Grid 12.5 inch square. And I'll show you how we use this in just a moment. First, we're going to give our work a press real quick. Then we're going to lay this out and get going. Okay, here's how we're going to do this. I have my quilt laid out on the table. I've got some clips over here. I think that's probably out of frame, but I've got clips holding this on the table so this doesn't go anywhere. The first thing we're going to do is take our square and line it up at the top of our blanket on the right-hand side. I happen to start on the right-hand side. You're going to notice a couple of things, one of which is there are going to be some imperfections in your quilt. The trick is working with those in such a way that once you're done, you have a product, an end product, that can be, that once you get the binding around it, no one's ever going to see any of the weirdness on there. Okay, so this was originally a 3-inch piece of border on here. And because it was 3 inches with the seam allowance of 1/4 inch, I'm going to go 1, 2, and 3/4 now. So it's 2 3/4. So my 1/4 inch line should line up right along that seam, and it mostly does. There's a little bit of wave in there, maybe 1/8 inch difference right here, but other than that, it's fine. This side, same thing. Now this one, there's a little bit more of a difference because this bowed out a little bit here. Now this is where we have to make decisions. Are we going to cut off where it bowed out, or are we going to try to get it to line up like this and go with that? Now, in this particular case, what I'm going to do is line up this 3/4 inch line along the inside of this, and then I'm going to take my next ruler and line it up and see how far the bowing goes. So basically, once I butt this ruler up against my square, I got to see as it goes down if I'm going to end up cutting off a lot of material. And actually, it looks like I'm going to leave a lot of material exposed in this case. So what I am going to do in this situation, let's keep going down the rabbit hole here. Last ruler, 3/4 inch mark, 3/4 inch. This is bowed out a little bit. So I'm just going to make a couple of little adjustments here until I am satisfied that my work is going to accurately reflect reality in terms of being square. Okay, this I'm happy with right now. Now I can see coming over here, there's a little bowing in here, but not by much. If it's like 1/8 inch or 1/8 inch is the most you want to see. 1/16 inch is absolutely workable. Basically what I'm saying is, once we put the binding on, it's gonna cover up any exposed batting or backing, essentially. So if you know what your tolerances are, to me, somewhere between a 1/16 inch to as much as 1/8 inch, I can cover up, I can deal with that. So I'm going to go with this particular setup right here. And now this is where it gets a little bit tricky because your rulers can move on you. I'm going to look down the line, make sure I've got everything situated. I'm going to put my hand on this ruler here with my pinky finger hanging off just to hold it. I see one little tweak here. Okay. If you see anything out of line when you're looking down the line, just make sure you make the adjustment real quick before you actually start cutting. Okay, so now I'm gonna open up my Olfa and start going down the line here. Okay. Now I'm hitting my next ruler, making sure that that's lined up, and just keep going. Now, I'm gonna get this out of the way. This is where it gets kind of tricky. Now you have to become a pool player and start leaning over. Again, making sure this is all lined up nice. Taking it all the way up to the top. Okay, so that's my first cut. Now, I'm gonna make this cut right here. Actually, you know what? I'm gonna hold off on that for a second, because I see a little bit of bowing here too. So what I'm doing is adjusting this ruler to account for the bowing that I'm seeing right here until I get this lined up again. I am going to hold off on making this next cut until I pull this work away. So I'm going to cut the end of this off so I can get it out of my way. And this is where it gets, again, it's a little bit tricky and you have to kind of figure out how you're going to deal with it. In this case, I think what I'm going to do is turn my work. So I'm going to move this stuff off to the side. And rotate. Okay. Now, you probably noticed I didn't really reference any of the markings on here. I'm really referencing the lines on my quilt itself and then the lines on the rulers themselves. So now, pulling this up, okay. Let's make sure we're secure over here. All right. Starting with my square. Okay, so I'm looking at the outer edge, but I'm also looking at the inside of this border here to make sure it largely aligns with that 2 3/4 inch mark. And then I'm going to put this ruler up against this one, line those markings up, and I'm going to look for this is a 1/2 inch here, that's going to mess with my brain. I'm going to turn this around until I get to the point where I can see clearly 2 3/4 inch. Okay. And that actually looks pretty darn good. Okay. Now, I don't need this long ruler for this edge. It's a shorter edge, but I'm going to go ahead and actually, I'm going to go ahead and do this. So again, lining up my 3/4 line here, as well as now looking up at the top and lining this line up with the top edge of my quilt. Yeah. And it looks like I got pretty good margins on this one. Yeah. Okay. So once I'm happy with this, I'm going to go ahead and start making the cut. All right. All right, so that's the essential process. I will keep going through this, so I'm just going to finish it off real quick on camera, but that's essentially it. You're just going to rotate Make sure that you're looking at the outer edge as well as the inner edge on your border to make sure everything is lined up so you have multiple points of reference to ensure that you're squaring your quilt off properly. But that's all there is to it. And it is a lot easier, I must say, doing this on a table than it is on the floor, which is where I used to do it. And I'm telling you, if you haven't discovered tables yet to do your work on, go get one. Trust me, it's worth it. Also, the nice thing about these fold-out tables is you can fold them right back up and reclaim your living room when you're done, which my husband also appreciates. Alrighty, okay, so same process. And also make sure, it's just a note because I just almost did it, make sure that your binding isn't getting folded under your binding. I'm sorry, your backing doesn't get folded under or anything kind of gets wonky on here, because sometimes you can accidentally cut things you don't want to cut. All right. Okay. So since I'm down here at this end, I'm just going to start lining up at this end again. Just throw that out of the way. Let's see. I'm at 12 and a half. Okay. So once again, getting this lined up on this edge and getting it squared away here at my 2 3/4 inch line. Excellent. Okay. Next ruler, same thing. And on this one, I see I've got a little bit of bowing. Let's see how far this goes. Let's see if it's enough to bother me. Yeah, that's a problem. Okay, so what I'm going to do is shift this in a little bit to take that into account. Okay, so on this edge, I'm gonna have a little bit of batting and backing showing. Let's see how much it is. And then if we need to trim it a little bit more, we will. I'd like to keep it as close to the outer border, as close to 2 3/4 as possible. Okay. So up here on this part, I do have about 1/4 inch of batting and backing showing, which to me is too much. I don't want that much there. Although I probably still can cover that up. Nevertheless, what I'm going to do is come up here with my square. Let's see why this happened. Let me see if I can fix it. Okay, some of that could be due just to my having such a long train of rulers lined up that it bowed out just a little bit. Okay, so if I put my square on here, this actually, once I get this squared away with my 2 3/4 here and my 2 3/4 here, I'm going to end up cutting off most of what is bothering me right here. And then that will be enough to work with and cover up with my binding. All right. Excellent. Now we're good. That's 1/8 of an inch at the best, at most. Okay. Last one. This should be the easiest one. Let's go ahead and clip it anyway. All right. So this is the edge I just finished cutting. I'm lining this up with that edge. I'm lining my 2 3/4 line up, and this outer edge, that lines up really nicely. Make sure I get these nice and lined up. And keep my 2 3/4 here. Okay. And this one, I'm gonna call it good. Last cut. Well, I just nudged that, so I need to reset it. Does happen from time to time. Okay. And this I'm going to go ahead and turn here. Let's just make sure. Picking up where we left off. Do take your time with this. Obviously you can see if I accidentally nudge something, I pause and just get it squared away one more time. Oh, missed a spot. There we go. Okay. Looks good. All right. And that is how you square off a quilt. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please hit like and subscribe. Have a great day.